let's get started using useState. And as you can see here, compared to my other videos, I'm using code sandbox.io. There's no issue if you use Visual Studio Code and do an npx create React app, or if you go to Code Sandbox and just use their pre-formatted React environment. The example is going to work the same. So first off, let's declare useState. And what does that look like? So here what we have is destructured array, and we have react.useState. Now if we wanted to go up here, and we could equally do useState up there. But typically what I find is that when you start getting more imports in a larger project, it's kind of annoying to check down then scroll up with what are you actually importing. You already have React here, and I think doing it inline here is much smoother looking, but it's up to your choice here. So we have this destructured array. Like I said, we have value and we have set value, and it's pretty descriptive of what these are from the outset, but let's demystify it a little bit. So we have react.useState here, and right now value is going to be whatever is in here. So if we set it to 0, value right here is going to be 0, and let's remove this, and then we'll switch this to value. And we could see that value indeed is set to 0. If I wanted to change this to, I think this would be black, we would see that this indeed is set to whatever I put in here. Now this works for things other than just numbers and strings, and later in this video I'll show you how to do it with arrays and objects and all that other jazz. But let's do the infamous button clicker example, and I'll walk you through how this works. And I'll add in some extra fun things in there for you as well, so it's not, I guess, super boring. So first what we're going to do is set this to 0. Let's remove this completely and have that as the example. We're going to take this out. We're going to have two buttons now. One is going to increase the value, one is going to decrease the value. So now that we have this, how do we modify this value here? We already saw how to set it, what this value means, which right now it's set to 0, and we've plopped it in the header. So how do we go about using this set value? What does this do? Well, React is going to return the initial value and then a function that deals with changing it. So let's go ahead and create two functions that will increase and then decrease by adding and subtracting by 1. So what we have right here is increase by 1. And when we go to utilize this, what we're going to do is we're going to take the previous example or the previous state, which right now is 0, and then this is going to take that value 0 plus 1. So if this was at 10, this would just return here 10 plus 1. And it doesn't have to be the word previous. You could write down hot dog, beer, NASCAR, whatever you want to in here. This is just a placeholder term representing whatever the most current state is in your specific use state. In this case, set value or value. And it's also a great idea to create functions rather than just throw around set value all over the place. You typically want to have a function that encapsulates the idea of what it is you're trying to do, because maybe you're trying to do more than just set a value. Maybe there's other things you're going to trigger in there, do as well. Now we're just going to take this right here, and we're going to do subtract by 1. And so how do we hook this up and use it? Well, it's pretty easy. We're going to come down in here. And actually, let's go ahead and add an H4 right here. Going to set up that value one more time. We're going to have on click, increase by 1. We're going to come in and copy and paste this. And actually, let's make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So as we add 1, we could see here that whenever we click it, what's happening is it's not just changing the value here, it's actually re-rendering this part of the page here. If this was a regular variable, React would not care and it would increment it, but it wouldn't hold it in such a special way as it is with the useState here. So if you have a user who's inputting numbers, updating something, maybe you have a calculator online, I don't know what it is your project will entail. useState is just a good way of capturing and maintaining a certain value in between all the function calls that you're actually going to use. But it's not just good for a counter, you could use it for some other things that you may want to trigger. So let's come in here and let's go and add some just random classes in here. Actually, I want to call this green text here. Font size is 45 pixels. We're going to copy that. I'm going to make it just red right here. So what are we going to do with this then? Well, if we come into here, what we could do is we could have our class name. And what I want to do, if the value is going up, I want to make it green. If the value is going down, I want to make it red. Well, how do I maintain that? How do I synchronize that with the useState here? Well, we could use useState one more time. So now not only do I have useState that's holding the initial value, but now I have something that's holding an initial Boolean value of false. So if it's increasing here, what I want to do is come in and, you guessed it, set is increasing to true. And if it's decreasing here, I want to set it to false. And so what I'm going to have is this ternary operator here. Now let me close this off so it's easier to read. So if it's increasing, I want the class name to be, what was it here? Green text. Otherwise, I want it to be red text. So as it goes up, we could see that it's green. Nothing else really special is going on with it. But as we subtract 1, not only is it maintaining the state in between all these function calls where typically variables may get lost, you know, they'll get collected and forgotten about because they've already served their purpose. But then also what we're doing is maintaining the Boolean state of whether or not our number is being added to or subtracted. And this is a pretty useful example, pretty simple example of useState. And let's go on and see how we could use useState with arrays. All right, so in this section, we're going to be looking at arrays and how to use them with useState. And it's actually quite interesting. It may be a little funky at first, depending on where you're starting at from like your, I guess, technical background. But I think you'll see that it's pretty powerful, just as useful, and pretty sleek. So let's get going. So what we have right here is we have names and we have set names. Destructured array, we've already touched on that. This is the array value right here. And set names gives you obviously the ability to set and switch this up if you want to. But I'm a visual person. Let's get started on the visual aspect of this. So let's just print this out to the screen. All right, and we see right here that we have Bob, Bernie the dog, and Ralph. Nothing extraordinary is going on. What we're just doing is printing out using the map functionality here. And don't forget, you got to set the key. Otherwise, it'll most likely yell at you. And there's some further reading and things to consider when you're having a key. You typically want to have unique identifiers. But in this case, since this is a low-level example, it's okay to just use what's provided here. But typically, you'd want to use some kind of special unique ID. But if none of that makes sense to you, don't worry about that right now. So we have all of this right here. Okay, we know how to use state. Let's spice things up a little bit. And let's actually add something to it. Now, if you are familiar with some JavaScript functionality, you know that there's the built-in JavaScript ways to add to an array, and we should not do those here. Because one thing that is interesting about useState is that we don't want any mutability, meaning we don't want things to change or shift what was there before, because that will create inconsistencies in our program. So let me show you how to get around that. So right here I have add name to array. We have not written this yet, but what this function is going to do is going to take this array and it's going to update it. And so what we're doing here is we're taking all of names before, so everything here, and what we're doing is we're just slapping Timothy at the very end of it. And so what we're doing is we're essentially not changing this state at all. What we're doing is we're creating a new one. So that way our code in React is consistent and that the state is stable. If things are changing and maybe you're not the only one on an application that's working with a very specific value, what happens if you or multiple people are trying to access a variable at the same time and it's in between states, in one state in one instance and another is just not updated across the application? This is a nice way to just throw away the old thing and create something new. So let's go ahead and click this. And we see that it keeps appending Timothy to the end here because it's just taking what was previously set in useState and is constantly appending the word Timothy to it. We can make it more dynamic, but I think you get the point from here. Now, an obvious follow-up question is, how do we remove something from an array? And this is one of the techniques that I use. I think you need to be a bit more, focused on what you want to remove, because it's not just like adding 1 to 2 or subtracting a value or switching booleans. You have to be a bit more targeted in what you exactly want removed from your array. And so what we have right here is we have remove names from array. Its functionality is the same as add names to array because it's obviously copy and pasted code, as you can see here. But what is one targeted way I could strip or filter or remove certain values from the array? Well, this is one way you could do it here. We could have an updated array, and we could use the filter method. Now this is arbitrary. I'm just throwing in random values here. And so what we're doing is we're taking names, we're taking X, which X is going to be, this is X, this is X. That's just one word. This is X. Every instance of Timothy is going to be X. And so we could actually just do something like name. Let's make this easier to read. So for every name, I want to return that name if the length is over a value of 6. So I think we see that we should only have Bernie the dog left over. But then how do we set this here? Do we use some kind of spread operator, or what's going on in here? And so since this literally just like pitches what was previous there and creates a new, so you don't have that mutating, changing state, we could just drop a new array in there. So let's update the array. We see we have all this right here. And we could actually see that I miscounted. This is actually an appropriate enough length that it's greater than 6. So we could keep adding these in here. And so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we were to do something like 8, we would still just be Bernie the dog. For some odd reason, I just didn't count when I did this. So that's an interesting thing to do. But another cool aspect of this would be, well, what if sometimes functions are expensive? Do we want to recalculate something every time? And there's a couple strategies for that. But let me show you how to take this right here, and we could just kind of dump it in. So we could have a const filter names and then set filter names. So then now what we have right here is we have our filter names, which comes from names, and it's the exact same thing that we're running right in here. So what's an easy way to test this on out? Well, let's come in, and rather than use names here, filter names is still an array. And we can see that it gives us Bernie the dog here. And so if you want to manually go through the process, this is typically what I do. But if you wanted to maybe do some more advanced, intermediate level, whatever makes sense to you, you could actually take this entire, or not entire process, but you could take this major step right here, and you could just go ahead and store it in a state variable right here if you want to, and reuse it throughout your app. So we're going to work with objects. First, we're going to work with these simple objects. And then in the next section, the final section, we're going to show how to work on nested, slightly more complicated type of objects, because there will come a point in your career experience as a developer when you need to work with complex stuff. But let's start with the simple things here. So first, we're going to make our typical useState. So we're going to have my dog and set my dog. And I haven't said this yet, but these could be whatever you want to, but typically the convention is whatever this name is going to be, and then you have set, and then whatever this value is over here. If you haven't picked up on that by now, that's just typically how these all are. So this is going to be about my dog. If you hear him in the background or snorting, sniffling pet sounds, that's him chewing on something. All right, so we have an object here. We have the name is Bernie, the breed is Havanese, and the weight is 9 pounds. And what I'm going to show in a very simple watered down example here is how to just change the weight. And then you could do this for literally anything else you want to. You can make your own objects, and it's kind of, once you figure out the pattern, you could just rinse and repeat it. So let's come in here and let's make a very simple site about my dog, and I'll talk you through what I did here. All right, so what we have right now is the header right here, or the heading about my dog up here. Then we have Bernie, breed, and then weight. We can see this is the key value pair, so we're calling the key name to get Bernie, breed to get Havanese, weight to get 9. So what if I wanted to update the weight? He recently went and got fixed, and so we had to do a checkup on him, and he gained a pound. So he's a whopping 10 pounds right now. So how do we deal with this? Well, let's go ahead and do something like this. Update my dog's weight to 10 pounds. We have update dog's weight right here. It's given us an error because we have not written it yet. And now this is kind of where the magic happens. So we know we're going to need set my dog. But how do we use it? How do we deal with stuff in here? And it's very similar to an array. We've already kind of seen what to do with an array and how to add stuff. But with an array, it was, you may want to filter, just give it a new array overall. So what's the logic here? So it's very similar in some areas. So we're going to have my dog. So what we're going to do is we're essentially bringing in all this stuff. And we're saying, okay, so far what we care about is that, you know, it's going to have these values here. And so the next thing after the comma is, what do you want to change about the dog? And right here, we're going to do 10 pounds. And sometimes I just slap a generous comma on the end here. And so now when I click this button, update my dog's weight to 10 pounds, this should go from 9 to 10, updating the state right here. And like I said, the set my dog here, all it is saying, okay, I want everything coming in from this dog, and then everything after that, tell me what are the differences you want me to consider. So let's click this, and we see that, in fact, this went from 9 pounds to 10 pounds. It's not magic. It's not probably the most captivating thing ever, but this is how you work with singular objects and change them out, switch attributes about them using useState. All right, so in this section, the last section, we're going to talk about complex objects. And so this is when you have an object, but then you have like other objects in there. And how do we deal with that with useState? How do we, even change that? Because I think it's far easier for us as users to have some kind of data structure, some data type, and be like, okay, plop it right here on the page. But then we get to a point of like, how do we go through and change it? Like, this is, I know how to use it, but like, how do I patch this thing up? And so it's actually pretty easy to do. So let's go ahead and kind of start with our previous example here, but we're going to switch it up a little bit. So let's pretend I have another dog. And if I had another dog, I wouldn't know what to do with my life because that would be a ton of work. So let me go ahead and write these all out here. So now that I have this set up here, I actually was going to name Bernie Descartes because I'm a really big nerd, but I was talked out of it. So if you ever want to know why I named him Bernie, just, drop something below. Maybe in a few videos after I give him enough, props in all my videos, I'll do a random video on Bernie and how bizarre he is of a dog. But so we have an object here is denoted by these open and closing squiggly brackets here. And then we have an object here, and then there's some values on the inside. So let's go ahead and just dump them out here and lay them out on the screen. And then we'll talk about how to change any given one of these. All right, so now I have my dogs. I have Bernie, he's a Havanese, he's 10 pounds, my real dog. And then my imaginary dog, Descartes, Havanese, 4.4 pounds, just got him. He's like 2 months old. So I have this here. It's pretty easy to use. It makes sense. But how do I say I wanted to change the weight? Say Descartes, the name's going to stay the same. The breed's going to stay the same. But like Bernie, I think he may be topping out. I'm not sure. Let's add like 3 pounds, just round it up to 7 for Descartes. So let's go down here, make a button, because why not? Update Descartes' weight. We have not made that yet, so let's come up into here. That's not what I wanted at all. And so how do we get to this weight here using the useState? Well, we could probably hack something together if we want to, but what you're going to see is it really looks similar to what we did with the arrays in 2 sections ago in this video. So we use, I've switched that to set my dogs up here because it's an object we're returning. What we're going to start off by doing is come into here and we're going to do, not that, my dogs. So that's going to give us everything that is in here coming back. And what does that mean afterward? Anything else we could change or add on or whatever it may be. In this case, we want to change something. So let's go ahead and do Descartes is what we want to change. So we're targeting now this section of the object here. And this is the part that may be a bit, it may not make sense a whole lot here. But what we're saying now is that we want our entire object, Descartes, from dogs. We want everything. But what do we do after that? We change whatever the heck we want to. So wait, we're going to update this to 7 pounds. And we should be good. It's going to create a new object for us. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the whole object. Then you're going to specify where in that object you want to do the changing. And then in there, you're going to do a spread operator, which is this little thing right here. You're going to do mydogs.Descartes. We're going to bring in this entire dog object now. And then after that comma, we're going to say, no, this isn't 4.4 pounds. It's going to be 7. And let's say if there was even another nested object inside of Descartes, it would just be rinse and repeat. You do mydogs.Descartes. And if there was something like, some kind of list of, or another object of tricks he may know, it'd be mydogs.Descartes.tricks. And then you'd have a comma, and then you would target, one of them and change it to sit, stand, or whatever it may be. So this is really just a rinse and repeat method here. And let's do it in practice. And you see that now Descartes started off at 4.4 pounds, is now 7 pounds. And this is how we just navigate through complex objects. And it's as simple as this. If you like this video, like stuff I do, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Hopefully it's constructive criticism, and I'll see you in the next video.